What if one of Hollywood's greatest war epics wasn't the story you thought it was? The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957, is remembered for its sweeping jungle sets, its unforgettable march, and that explosive finale. But behind the camera, secrets simmered. Actors rebelled, directors gambled with danger, and history itself was rewritten for the screen. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain. Here are 20 shocking, bizarre, little-known facts about the bridge on the River Kwai you never knew. Alec Guinness hated the whistling scene. This wasn't just an iconic introduction. It was Alec Guinness's personal irritation made immortal. The opening march of the POWs, whistling the Colonel Bogey March, is burned into cinema history. It became the soundtrack of defiance, instantly recognizable even to people who haven't seen the movie. Yet what fans don't realize is that Guinness hated whistling. He thought it was juvenile, undignified, even silly for men who had endured the harshest conditions of war. David Lean, however, knew it was brilliant shorthand for resilience, an unarmed army mocking their captors without words. At first, Guinness resisted, rolling his eyes during rehearsals. He even tried convincing Lean to scrap the scene, saying it made Nicholson look too lighthearted. But Lean stood firm, insisting it captured the soul of defiance. Guinness finally complied, albeit reluctantly. And the irony? The scene that irritated him became the most quoted and parodied element of the movie. From playgrounds to military barracks, people whistled it endlessly. It turned into a global cultural phenomenon, seeping into pop culture references for decades. For Guinness, it was a reminder of how little control actors truly have once the director calls action. What he dismissed as childish became an immortal anthem of endurance. The bridge explosion nearly went wrong. This wasn't just a finale. It was a one-shot gamble that nearly collapsed into disaster. For the climax, Lean insisted on demolishing a full-scale wooden bridge built in the Sri Lankan jungle. Months of work and a fortune in materials went into its construction. The plan was simple: run a real train across, blow the charges, and let the bridge crash spectacularly into the river. But filmmaking rarely follows the plan. Multiple cameras were rigged to capture every angle, because there would be no second take. On detonation day, disaster struck. One operator forgot to remove his lens cap, losing priceless footage. Another nearly died as shrapnel whizzed past his head. Even Lean, obsessively crouched near the blast, risked his life for the perfect shot. The bridge roared, flames soared, and a mountain of timber crashed into the river in a single, jaw-dropping moment. To audiences, it looked effortless, but behind the spectacle lay a razor-thin margin between cinematic triumph and catastrophe. That scene didn't just define the movie, it defined Lean's reputation as a director willing to risk everything for authenticity. Alec Guinness almost quit the film. This wasn't just creative tension. It was near mutiny. Alec Guinness, a man of principle and precision, hated how Nicholson was written. To him, the character was portrayed as foolish, even a collaborator, which felt offensive given Britain's wartime history. He argued relentlessly with Lean, saying Nicholson's motives made no sense. Lean saw Nicholson as a tragic figure, blinded by pride. Guinness saw a caricature of loyalty. Their arguments grew so heated that Guinness phoned his wife, telling her he was quitting. He didn't care if it wrecked his career. He wasn't going to humiliate himself on screen. It was only his wife's persuasion that kept him in Sri Lanka. "Do the film," she urged. "You may regret leaving more than you regret staying." Reluctantly, Guinness stayed. Ironically, that reluctant decision gave him the performance of a lifetime, one that won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. But even in victory, Guinness never softened. In later interviews, he admitted he never liked Nicholson as written. The world saw a towering performance. Guinness saw a role he almost abandoned. Elephants rescued the production. This wasn't just a jungle shoot. It was survival filmmaking. The Sri Lankan terrain was unforgiving mud-swallowed trucks, rain-drowned equipment, and roads barely existed. Production could have collapsed under the sheer logistics of moving lights, cameras, and bridge materials. Then came the saviors. Elephants. Local mahouts guided these giant animals to haul equipment across rivers, drag logs through muck, and transport supplies where no machine could reach. Elephants became the unsung crew members, working alongside sweating grips and carpenters. Lean himself marveled at their precision, noting they handled gear with more delicacy than some humans. Without them, the bridge might never have been built, let alone destroyed. What's bizarre is how little this contribution is remembered. When audiences marvel at the scale of the bridge, they imagine teams of men laboring. The reality is more primal. Nature's own giants dragged Hollywood's vision through the wilderness. In a strange twist of fate, a film about engineering ingenuity owed its existence to animals that had nothing to do with war or railways. Their silent strength built cinematic history. William Holden's record paycheck. This wasn't just another paycheck. It was a seismic shift in Hollywood economics. William Holden, already a big star, knew his leverage. Playing Shears, the cynical American sailor turned reluctant commando, he demanded not only $300,000 up front, an astronomical figure in 1957, but also a share of the film's profits. The studio balked, then caved. When The Bridge on the River Kwai became a global smash, Holden's deal ballooned. By the end, he pocketed over $2 million. To put that in perspective, many of his British co-stars earned modest salaries barely scratching five figures. Alec Guinness won an Oscar, but not a windfall. Holden, meanwhile, laughed all the way to the bank. His contract changed the game. Stars saw they could demand more than flat fees, they could own a piece of the success. That model reshaped negotiations for decades, paving the way for profit-sharing deals that made actors like Tom Cruise and Robert Downey Jr. fortune builders. Holden's role in Kwai didn't just make him richer. It rewired Hollywood's entire system of pay. A real POW called it a fantasy. This wasn't just creative license. It was a betrayal to survivors. Ernest Gordon, a Scottish officer who lived through the Burma Railway nightmare, was furious at how lean softened reality. In truth, POW camps were hell. Starvation, cholera, beatings, endless death. Men wasted away into skeletons under unbearable labor. But in The Bridge on the River Kwai, the camp looked almost orderly, like a grim Boy Scout retreat. Gordon publicly criticized the film for whitewashing agony, calling it a fantasy. He said real prisoners never had the strength, let alone the morale, to whistle in unison or construct such feats. To survivors, lean spectacle dishonored their pain. Audiences gasped at Nicholson's pride and Saito's cruelty, but the real story was darker, bleaker, and left no room for noble speeches. Hollywood had turned horror into entertainment. Gordon's anger served as a reminder. Cinema may capture grandeur, but it rarely captures the wounds that never healed. The bridge was actually built and destroyed. This wasn't just set dressing. It was real. Lean's crew spent months constructing an actual wooden bridge across Sri Lanka's Kalani River. It wasn't a facade. It was a fully functional span, built to bear the weight of a real train. Engineers oversaw the project as though it were an actual railway. Villagers watched in awe as Hollywood carved a bridge in their jungle. And then Lean did the unthinkable. He blew it up. For one scene, a fortune in manpower and timber went up in smoke. There were no digital effects, no models, no second attempts. Cameras had to capture the destruction in a single, spectacular moment. To film historians, this stands as one of cinema's most audacious acts of commitment, building a monument only to obliterate it. The bridge became both a symbol of obsessive pride within the story and obsessive ambition behind the camera. In both cases, it ended in flames. David Lean risked his life for the shot. This wasn't just dedication, it was obsession. On the day of the explosion, Lean refused to stand at a safe distance. Instead, he crouched near the bridge with a camera, desperate to capture the inferno at its most raw. Crew members panicked, begging him to retreat. He didn't move. When the charges blew, a wall of debris and fire roared toward him. Miraculously, Lean survived, and the footage made the final cut. That split-second gamble gave the scene its ferocity, but it also showed how far Lean was willing to push himself and his team. Some later called him reckless, others a genius. Either way, that moment proved one thing. Lean was prepared to risk his life to etch cinema into eternity. Japanese audiences were outraged. This wasn't just entertainment. It was humiliation. When The Bridge on the River Kwai premiered in Japan, audiences erupted in anger. Veterans and historians condemned Colonel Saito's portrayal as weak, cruel, and incompetent. They argued it dishonored Japanese soldiers, reducing them to caricatures. Post-war Japan was already bruised, and this film rubbed salt in the wounds. Some theaters refused to screen it, sparking protests. To Western critics, the film was a masterpiece. In Japan, it was propaganda. The irony is that while Lean sought to explore pride, obsession, and tragedy on both sides, his vision alienated the very people whose history he dramatized. It became a film celebrated worldwide, but resented in the land it indirectly depicted. Alec Guinness's Limp was real. This wasn't just acting brilliance, it was reality. In the final act, Nicholson limps across the bridge, torn between triumph and horror. Viewers assumed Guinness crafted the limp as part of Nicholson's unraveling. In truth, he had injured his leg days earlier while trudging through jungle terrain. Rather than halt production, Lean incorporated the limp into Nicholson's breakdown. What looked like weary physical acting was genuine pain. Guinness pushed through, transforming his injury into an unforgettable detail. Audiences saw symbolism, the proud colonel faltering. The reality was simpler. Guinness was hurting, but the camera never stopped rolling. If you're hooked on these secrets, go ahead and like and subscribe because we're only halfway through, and the wildest ones are still coming. Guinness thought. His performance was overrated. This wasn't just modesty. It was outright dismissal of his own triumph. When Alec Guinness won the Academy Award for Best Actor, the world applauded him as having delivered one of the greatest performances in film history. But Guinness himself never believed it. In private conversations, he often downplayed Nicholson, calling the role a trick of posture and voice rather than true depth. Even years later, when critics hailed his portrayal as a masterclass in restraint and psychological complexity, Guinness bristled. He felt audiences and reviewers projected greatness onto Nicholson, rather than finding it in his acting choices. Friends said he carried a secret disdain for the role that defined him internationally. Ironically, his reluctance became part of the mythology. The man who didn't believe in his character created one of cinema's most enduring figures. Perhaps his distance from Nicholson gave the performance its eerie ambiguity. Was the colonel a madman or a patriot? Guinness never gave a clear answer, because he never liked the role to begin with. The whistling scene was improvised. This wasn't just scripted genius. It was an accident that changed the movie's rhythm forever. The Colonel Bogey March was never written into the original script. During filming downtime, Lean noticed the extras whistling to pass the hours, mocking their own discomfort in the heat. That spark became the film's opening anthem. Lean ordered the men to whistle it while marching into camp, transforming a casual tune into a cinematic thunderclap. The decision reshaped the tone of the entire movie. Without a single line of dialogue, audiences understood the soldiers' resilience, defiance, and unity. It's hard to imagine Kwai without that sound, but had Lean not been attentive, the opening might have played silently. Sometimes, the greatest moments aren't scripted, they're captured in real time. The improvised whistling turned into one of the most famous sound cues in film history. living on far beyond the movie itself. An elephant saved the shoot. This wasn't just a logistical challenge. It was a showdown between Hollywood machinery and nature. Midway through production, a truck hauling vital equipment broke down on a muddy jungle road. Panic swept the crew without the gear. Filming would grind to a halt for days. Locals stepped in with an unexpected solution: elephants. Under the guidance of mahouts, the massive animals hauled cameras, generators, and even bridge construction materials across terrain that would have swallowed tires whole. Crew members later admitted the elephants were more reliable than trucks, working tirelessly under conditions that would have snapped machines in half. What's stranger is how quietly this story has been forgotten. When people marvel at the bridge or the sweeping shots, they rarely know that elephants literally dragged Hollywood's vision into being. The film's legacy rests not only on human labor, but also on the strength of animals who had no stake in its story. In the jungle, technology failed. Nature, unexpectedly, saved the movie. Guinness nearly walked away for good. This wasn't just friction. It was nearly the death of the film's soul. After repeated clashes with Lean, Guinness reached a breaking point. He felt Nicholson was written as a buffoon, blind to his own collaboration. He begged Lean to let him rework lines, to inject humanity, to make the Colonel less absurd. Lean refused. For days, Guinness sulked, avoiding crew members, rehearsing lines with visible bitterness. He told friends he was done, prepared to quit mid-shoot. But his wife's voice carried across the miles in a letter that changed history. "Stay. Finish it. You may regret leaving more than you regret staying." He stayed, reluctantly, and transformed irritation into one of cinema's most layered performances. In hindsight, that stubbornness became his secret weapon. Nicholson's pride, rigidity, and controlled rage felt authentic because Guinness himself was fuming beneath the surface. Art and anger fused into greatness. Holden's deal changed Hollywood forever. This wasn't just a payday. It was a blueprint for the future of stardom. William Holden's contract, $300,000, plus a share of profits, was radical in 1957. Actors at the time earned flat fees, no matter how successful a film became. Holden, guided by shrewd agents, demanded something different: a stake in the outcome. When The Bridge on the River Kwai shattered box office records, Holden's gamble paid off beyond imagination. His earnings soared into millions, dwarfing the salaries of his co-stars. This created resentment on set, with British actors quietly mocking the rich American. But more importantly, it reshaped Hollywood economics. Holden proved that stars could be partners, not employees. In the decades that followed, profit-sharing deals became the holy grail for big names. From Jack Nicholson in Batman to modern franchises, the model that Holden pioneered exploded into industry standard. His role as Shears may be remembered for cynicism, but his contract was visionary. In a way, Holden didn't just act in Kwai. He rewrote the script for Hollywood itself. The bridge became a tourist attraction. This wasn't just a movie set. It became a landmark. After the film's release, thousands of travelers went searching for the real bridge on the River Kwai. But here's the twist. The river by that name didn't exist at the time. Tourists flooded Thailand, asking locals to point them to a place that wasn't on the map. The Thai government eventually gave in to demand, renaming a stretch of river Kwai Yai so visitors could have their pilgrimage. Souvenir stands popped up, faux POW camps were staged for photo ops, and the line between fact and fiction blurred. Even today, tourists visit bridges in Kanchanaburi, believing they're walking on cinematic ground, when in reality, Lean shot in Sri Lanka. The film literally reshaped geography, bending a nation's map to match Hollywood's vision. Few movies can claim that kind of real-world impact, where celluloid fantasy redrew rivers. Lean believed the film was a failure. This wasn't just self-doubt. It was crushing despair from a perfectionist. During editing, David Lean reportedly became convinced the film wouldn't work. He obsessed over pacing, worried it dragged, and feared audiences would find Nicholson confusing instead of compelling. Studio executives, too, were nervous about the runtime and grim tone. Lean's confidence plummeted. He even told friends he thought the film would flop. But when the movie premiered, audiences erupted in praise. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece, and box office returns silenced every doubt. Lean went from fearing humiliation to winning the Oscar for Best Director. The story highlights a strange truth about creative genius. Sometimes, even the architects of greatness don't recognize it. The POW camp looked too comfortable. This wasn't just a set. It was a controversy. Veterans who survived the Burma Railway were horrified when they saw the film's depiction of the prison camp. Compared to the real nightmare disease, starvation, beatings, the film's camp looked almost neat, even livable. Survivors accused Lean of romanticizing their suffering. The huts were too clean, the soldiers too strong, the work too orderly. For them, the true death railway was a graveyard of misery, not a stage for pride and speeches. To audiences, the camp felt authentic. To veterans, it was a sanitized lie. The criticism lingered for years, reminding fans that cinematic realism can still be far from truth. Guinness boycotted the premiere. This wasn't just stubbornness. It was personal bitterness. Despite Oscar buzz and global acclaim, Alec Guinness refused to attend the London premiere. He was still furious about his clashes with Lean, still convinced Nicholson had been mishandled. While his co-stars smiled for cameras, Guinness stayed home, distancing himself from the circus of celebration. Ironically, his absence only fueled speculation, with critics whispering that the tension between Lean and Guinness mirrored the tension within the story itself. When Guinness later won the Academy Award, he accepted graciously, but the scars of the production never faded. His boycott became another strange chapter in the saga of an actor forever at odds with the role that defined him. The real POWs were never consulted. This wasn't just artistic liberty. It was silence imposed on survivors. At no point did Lean or the studio invite real Burma Railway POWs to advise on the script or the set. Their voices weren't included. Their scars weren't acknowledged. Instead, novelist Pierre Boulez's fictionalized account, written without first-hand experience, formed the foundation. For veterans, it felt like erasure, as if Hollywood had stolen their trauma and reshaped it into spectacle without permission. Some survivors boycotted the film entirely, calling it a betrayal. To them, Kwai wasn't remembrance. It was revisionism. And there you have it, the untold stories behind The Bridge on the River Kwai. A film of triumph, tension, and secrets that spilled far beyond the screen. From elephants hauling cameras to Alec Guinness battling his own role, these hidden truths prove the movie's legacy is bigger than the bridge itself. But here's the real question. Was it history rewritten, or cinema redefining history? Drop your thoughts below, subscribe for more hidden Hollywood tales, and keep the conversation alive.